Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We would like to share about chapter 6, population growth and economic development. Population is a dynamic field. There have been significant change in birth rate and the population trajectories of countries and continents in recent years. Global population is still growing by more than 80 million years. However, and it most likely to continue growing for the rest of the century unless we take action. Here, as you can see, 9 countries will make up over half the projected total population increase by 2050. China, India, US, and so on. Around 2027, India is expected to overtake China as the world's most populous country. 55 countries are projected to experience a population reduction by 2050. China's population, for example, is projected to decrease by 2.2% or 31.4 million. Rapid population growth and its causes continue to pose a major impediment to achieve the sustainable development goal, in particular eradicating hunger and poverty, achieving gender equality, and improving health and education. Okay, here we must now see major issue about population growth and quality of life. First, will developing countries be able to improve level of living given as anticipated population growth? Second, how will developing countries deal with the vast increases in their labor forces? Next, how will higher population growth rate affect poverty? Fourth, will developing countries be able to extend the coverage and improve the quality of healthcare and education in the face of rapid population growth? Next, is there a relationship between poverty and family size? Last but not least, how does influence in the developed world affect the ability of developing countries to provide for their people? Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We would like to share about chapter 6, population growth and economic development. Population is a dynamic field. There have been significant change in birth rate and the population trajectories of countries and continents in recent years. Global population is still growing by more than 80 million years. However, and it most likely to continue growing for the rest of the century unless we take action. Here, as you can see, 9 countries will make up over half the projected total population increase by 2050. China, India, US, and so on. Around 2027, India is expected to overtake China as the world's most populous country. 55 countries are projected to experience a population reduction by 2050. China's population, for example, is projected to decrease by 2.2% or 31.4 million. Rapid population growth and its causes continue to pose a major impediment to achieve the sustainable development goal, in particular eradicating hunger and poverty, achieving gender equality, and improving health and education. Okay, here we must now see major issue about population growth and quality of life. First, will developing countries be able to improve level of living given as anticipated population growth? Second, how will developing countries deal with the vast increases in their labor forces? Next, how will higher population growth rate affect poverty? Fourth, will developing countries be able to extend the coverage and improve the quality of healthcare and education in the face of rapid population growth? Next, is there a relationship between poverty and family size? Last but not least, how does influence in the developed world affect the ability of developing countries to provide for their people?
My name is Aina Solehah binti Basri, metric number 2642887. I want to present about world population growth throughout history. Estimated world population growth. At the year 1650, world population has grown to nearly 250 million, less than a fifth of the population China today. Beginning of the Industrial Revolution, around year 1750, world population is tripled to 728 million. Year 1750 until 1950, an additional 1.7 billion people were added to the planet numbers. Next, 1950 until 1990, the Earth's human population more than the double again, bringing the total figure to be around 5.3 billion. By 2050, the population of less developed country will reach over 8 billion, nearly 7/8 of the world population. Tables show the world population growth at 1950 to 2050. 1,400 generation for the world population to double. Today, it will take about 58 years or two generations for world population to double at the current growth rate. Moreover, whereas it's 1,750 years to add 450 million people to the world population between year 1 to the onset of the Industrial Revolution. This same number of the people is today being added in less than 7 years. The reason for the sudden change in overall population trend is that for almost all of recorded history, the rate of population change, whether it's up or down, has been strongly influenced by the combined effect of the famine, disease, malnutrition, plague, and war. In 20th centuries, such conditions came increasingly under technological and economic control. As the result, human mortality, or called the death rate, is now lower than at any other point in human existence. It is the decline in mortality resulting from the rapid technological advance in modern medicine, improved nutrition, and the spread of the modern sanitation measured throughout the world, particularly within the past half century, that has resulted in the unprecedented increase in the world population growth, especially in developing countries.
Hi everyone, now I will explain the structure of the world population. The world population is not distributed equally in three perspectives, namely geographic region, fertility and mortality level, as well as age structure and dependency level. In developing countries, there are more than three-quarters of the world population lives in this region, like Asia, Africa, and South America, while less than one-quarter of the population lives in the developed countries, such as North America, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and many more. In this picture shows regional distribution of the world population in 2010 and projected population for 2050. In this picture, we can see total population will increase by 38% to 9.5 billion population in 2050 from 6.89 billion population in 2010. In Africa, the population will increase rapidly to 22% of the total population in 2050 from 15% in 2010, while the remaining region saw declining trend or remain stable in 2050. The picture shows the world population in each country in 2018. The total population is 7.63 billion people in 2018. In the picture, we can see every country have a different land style with different total number of population lived in the country. The size of the country in this map represents the size of the population. Each square represents 100,000 people. So the bigger the country size in the picture means that the more people are living in that country. Furthermore, we can see many people are living in China and India. China had a population of 1.42 billion, which is equivalent to 18.5% of the world population. Meanwhile, India has a 1.35 billion, which is equivalent to 17.7% of the world population. Next, the size of land in Russia takes up 11% of the world total land. But Russia is only less than 2% of the world population. Therefore, the size of land in Russia in the picture is similar with the size of Bangladesh because the Russia population is favored. The next part is fertility and mortality trend. The rate of population increase or decrease is a measurement to measure the percentage yearly net relative changes in population size. Here are two factors influencing changes in population size, namely natural increase and net international migration. Natural increase is the number of children born is greater than number of deaths. This means fertility is more than mortality. While net international migration is the difference between migration and immigration in a country. The birth rate is the number of children born alive each year per 1,000 people. The table shows developing countries have a higher birth rate compared to developed countries. The birth rate is higher at 15 to 45 per 1,000 people in developing countries related to the birth rate in developed countries at less than 15 per 1,000 people. Total fertility rate is the average number of children a woman would have. The rate in developing countries will decline in 2012 compared to 1970. Death rate is the number of deaths each year per 1,000 people. The death rate was lower significantly by more than 50% in Asia and Latin America over the past 3 decades, while Africa and Middle East was lowered by more than 30%. The death rate was lower because they have launched several measures of progress in reducing the death rates, such as modern vaccination campaign against malaria and yellow fever, as well as the proliferation of public health facilities, clean water supply, and public education to increase their health awareness. The death rate in Sub-Saharan Africa is higher because of AIDS epidemic. In this statement, the region is divided according to population age. Young dependency ratio is the proportion of young people who is under age 15 to the working population age 16 to 64 in a country. As of 2011, the high-income countries have a low young dependency ratio to the population, while low-income countries have a higher ratio related to their population. The dependency burden in developing countries is higher because the workforce in developing countries must work harder to support their family and children. In United States and United Kingdom, workforce from age 15 to 34 is the main component in the category of population, so the country will be more productive in producing goods and services. In general, the more rapid the population growth rate is, the greater the proportion of dependent children in the total population, and the burden of people will increase because they must work harder to earn more income to support their family and children.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Norzilah and my metric number is 262321. So I will continue with the hidden momentums of population growth. The hidden momentums of population growth can explain by the phenomenon whereby population continues to increase even after a fall in birth rate, because the large accepting youthful populations expand the population base of potential parents. So now we look at the next slide, which show the figures 6.4. which is the population pyramids in all developed and developing countries and case of Ethiopia. There are two basic reasons for this population pyramid will become in. The first reason is the high birth rates cannot be altered substantially overnight. This is because the social, economic, and institutional forces that have influenced fertility rates over the course of centuries do not simply evaporate at the urging of national leaders. We know from the experience of European nations that sharp reductions in birth rates can take many decades. Consequently, even if developing countries assign top priority to the limitations of population growth, it will still take many years to lower national fertility to desired levels. And after that, the second reason is the age structure of many developing countries' populations, which is the less obvious reason for the hidden momentum of population growth. We can see that the figure 6.4 will show the great difference between age structure in less developed and more developed countries by means of two population pyramids for 2010. Each pyramid rises by 5 years age intervals of both males and females, with the total number in each age cohort measured on the horizontal axis. The panel A, which is the left and middle panels, show population pyramids for developed and developing countries, respectively. The age sketch is that listed between these two figures. The staple patterns range for the developing world as a whole, in contrast to a very low-income country such as Ethiopia, which is in the right panel, reflect the large decline in population growth in lower middle-income developing countries over the past quarter century, and particularly in China. For developed countries, in the contemporary periods, the population in middle cohorts is typically greater than that of young cohorts. This is partly but certainly not exclusively viewed as a traditional features of a period in which women have been delaying birth until later in life. From the Ethiopia pyramid, which in the panel B, expressed as share of population, young people greatly outnumber their parents, which is the age sketch. In this case is found to the right of the figure. When their generation reach adulthood, the number of potential parents will become much larger than at present. Panel A also focuses on the fact that some age brackets are increasing in size in some countries, while they are decreasing in others. This reflects that in the demographic transition, the fractions of the population of working age first rises and then falls. In contrast, where the fraction of people of working age is falling as a result of population gain, the resources needed for old age support are increasing. This is already a challenge for most high-income countries. Leading up to this period, a higher saving rate is required, but then allowing more immigrations can also help. The transition is likely to pose an even greater challenge for some middle-income countries, with big drops in fertility ahead of previous historical patterns, which in China but also in some other Asian countries.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Farah binti Solehah. My matric number is 255639. So I will continue the last part of the presentation, which is demographic transition. So as we know that increasing in human population years by years for the whole world move rapidly, which is caused the serious problem in providing food and schools. So our world quality life also has been threatened because of this, because the because of the quality life is a very important, and that will give big impact to our country and ourselves. So there was an observation on changes of these changes, which is population demography. So there's one model has been created in demographic transitions, which is demographic transition model that I will explain after this. So guys, what is a demographic transition model? Demographic transition model can be used to explain and make sense of changes in population demographic. So basically, we're going to see the trend that going to be used is birth rate and also death rate, which will help to show a country population growth rate cycle through the stages as the country develop economy. So actually this model help demographers to understand a country population's growth within 5 stages, as I mentioned before, so that the data that they have will help to addressing economy policy within country and across nations. Okay, now I'm going to explain about the stage in demographic transition, which is we have 5 stages. Okay, the first is stage 1, high mortality and high birth rate, as we can see from the graph. Before the rapid population growth, the birth rate in population is high, and as the death rate is also high during this time. So as we can see, the population growth during this stage are basically very slow and very small. This could be described in the reality, which is during before the Industrial Revolution, and as we can see in the pyramids, population pyramid is brought at the base, but since the mortality during that time is also high across all age, so the risk of death is particular high for the children. And as we can see, the pyramid also get much narrower towards the top. Okay, that's for the stage 1. For the stage 2, mortality fall, but the birth rate are still high. Okay, as we can see from the graph, the birth rate are still high, but the mortality but the death rate are getting fall, right? Okay, this is because of the health of the population are slowly start to improve. Okay, since the health of the population are already improved, but the fertility actually still remain as high as before, which is lead to the size of population getting grow rapidly. Okay, that's for the stage 2. For the stage 3, mortality low and birth rates fall. Okay, as we can see also in this graph, the birth rates fall consequently, which is the population growth also begins to decline, right? Okay, actually why this has happened? This happened actually because of the before this we have improved, right? Okay, at this stage actually the parents already adapt the healthier environment and choose to have a fewer children, because they assume that the economy is actually undergoing structural changes, which is make children less economically valuable. And during this stage, women actually are empowered socially and decide to have a fewer children than before. So as we can see, the stage 3 actually basically for the developing country. For the stage 4, the mortality low and birth rates low. Okay, at this stage, the rapid population growth before this are start to end, and because of the birth rates fall to similar level as the death rate actually already low, right? Okay, the population pyramid is now basically box-shaped, and as the mortality rate at young age is now very low, the younger cohorts are now very similar to the size, and only at the old age the cohorts gets smaller very rapidly. Okay, for the stage 5, mortality low and some evidence of rising fertility. Okay, at this stage, demographic transition change over the socio-economic modernization, which is very high level of development, will lead to the fertility rise again. Okay, they have a two possible, right? As we can see in this graph. Okay, if that's happened, actually most of the parents, as I mentioned before, choose to have 2 children only, not more than that. So it gives a chance to fall on in the long run, which leads to the decline of the population size in long run. Okay, now I'm going to show you guys the demographic transition in 5 countries, which is in Germany, Sweden, Chile, Mauritius, and China. Okay, actually, at the first, there are decline. As we can see, there are decline of mortality that start the phenomena booms, and then a decline of fertility brings the population booms. And okay, actually, these are estimates about the stage 2, stage 3, and 4. Okay, this shows that the rapid population growth in the country actually in the country and obviously for the 5 country is actually temporary phenomena, which is especially for the developing country. There are more concerns about the economic growth, which is they assume that, as I mentioned before, they assume that economy have a structural changes, so they don't want to have more than 2 children. Now I will go through to the development and population growth. Before that, I'm going to show guys about the birth rate versus death rate in 1975 to 1997. So I actually have picked some Asia country, which is Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, and Singapore. Okay, as we can see from this graph, actually most of the country have similar trends, which is the death rate is getting declined year by year, right? What we can see for the Singapore, actually they have start the birth rate with the lower amount than the others. Okay, and we can see the trend in Singapore are quite slow, which is what I mean is the trend in the population growth in Singapore are quite low because of the death rate is lower. At the same time, the birth rate is lower. Okay, actually this shows that Singapore are a highly developed country. Okay, most of the Asia country here have more birth rate than death rate, right? Which lead to rapid population. But as I mentioned before, Singapore population shows that they have a stable growth in population. This is why they are one of the country that actually developed country. Now, what are the relationship between the population growth and development? Okay, the first one is the fertility rate is the parameter which matters most for the population changes, which means that population growth are influenced by the fertility rate. The second one is developed country. So for the developed country, it will show the fertility rate tend to fall. So we could expect also for the developing country will have a decline in population growth. Why I'm saying this? Because for the rapid population growth, it will give pressure to the developing country, and one of the major contribution factor to the poverty for the underdevelopment. So it's very hard for the country to improve standard of living if the population keep rising. We cannot avoid for that, but we could control the birth rate by having a family planning. We could take Singapore as an example of the higher development. Because they already state that women can only have 2 children in that country, which means that they control the birth rate. We also could take Africa as an under a development country because the highly population growth, which lead high poverty and low standard of living country. It's because of the country are not control the birth rates. So we can conclude that most lowest growth in population is the most developed region. So for the next slide, we're going to see the population growth rate by level of development.